my assistant Amy for getting us. Oh, it's just that I got to for being my assistant and getting us going. I was having some technical difficulties, and the sign behind me is Amy's Chief sign. So, she's the big Chiefs fan. So this will be 60 plus years, and I've tried to squeeze it down and just put some highlights, but it's kind of hard to get 60 years in 60 minutes, but we did the best we could do. So it'll be a little bit about my background and what has formed my interest, some activities and challenges through the years, and then sharing my experience and those of others to encourage the newly diagnosed and their families. So that's kind of the highlights. And we began back in the 1950s. And I was an only child farm girl living near a very small rural Missouri town. And as you can see, I was a bright-eyed 6-year-old in first grade. But the summer of 1957, I started having problems. I couldn't keep up with my mother walking back to a garden she had way back in a pasture, or picking the gooseberries way back there. And we had some, a real broad concrete platform with steps at our back door. And I just plopped backwards trying to sit on the step. And I broke my ponytail clasp for my British pen pal that you'll learn more about later. And another symptom, my lips didn't seem to cover my teeth. Back to school in September 1957, I had trouble stepping up into the school bus and going from the elementary school up to the high school to go buy some ice cream sandwiches. I fell going up the stairs and I had difficulty enunciating words. So the elementary principal that had known me since first grade called my parents that I changed dramatically over the summer. So I was taken to the St. Joseph pediatrician, Dr. Harold Peterson. The first appointment was in the morning, and he thought I was malnourished. And that made my dad mad because he was a farmer. He raised beef and pork, and my mom had a big garden, and we had hens for eating and for eggs, and he wasn't happy. Then the second meeting led to hospitalization and the diagnosis. And this is the 5th grade teacher, the picture that you can see. I couldn't close my mouth very well. So the second visit was in the afternoon. He had me up on the examination table, and I just went plop back when he wanted me to lie back. And he goes, "Oh my goodness, I didn't expect that." And I was admitted to the hospital for testing, and they did a spinal tap to rule out a brain tumor. So I was 10 years old. My memory is of the nun in a habit with a huge white hat being with me as I fell asleep under the anesthesia. Then I woke up with a horrible headache. They made me sick, couldn't raise my head for days until the fluid built back up. But he diagnosed the MG and prescribed prostigmin. And at that time, the choices of medications were prostigmin, prednisone. They were starting to use mestinon, and ephedrine sulfate had been one of the first medications. The surgical procedure, thymectomy, removed the thymus by the open chest procedure. The mortality rate was 30%. And it was along that time that the positive air treatments were begun, and that helped reduce the mortality rate. A little bit about my background. this is a picture of some people that were influential in my life. It's from the Gower Centennial 1970. It's a couple of decades later, but the two people here are my grandparents. They did not appreciate education. They encouraged my mother to keep me home from school because I had this strange condition. But my parents, the middle couple, they both enjoyed reading and valued education. I liked school, and my mother was determined I would go to school. And then the lady on this side was a neighbor. Her family gave me their library of books dating back to the 1800s when she moved to St. Joseph after her father died. She had a handicapped arms. So at age 11, I had this library of books that I could read when I couldn't do physical things. A year later, I was still dragging through daily life. Dr. Peterson added a little pink capsule, and the medications weren't marked with names right at that time, so we didn't know exactly what it was. But my symptoms gradually improved. By 8th grade, I had weaned off of all medications. And these are high school pictures, my freshman picture, my senior picture with the old style. And I was a good student. I was yearbook editor, was pep club, and then college, I carried a full load at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, while working part-time at the campus personnel office. Then I was back to Gower for 1 year to teach language arts to 7th and 8th graders. And I went just for 1 year. It was agreed when I went there. But I continued teaching at Excelsior Springs Middle School for the next 2 years. And there I taught language arts, speech, and directed a play. So in 1970s, I was teaching. This picture, I was at East Buchanan, Gower. The school name changed while I was in college. And then at Excelsior Springs for 2 years, the other one. But the symptoms slowly returned in 1952. The students in the back of the classroom couldn't hear me. Or 1972, did I say 52? And I lost the first of 2 teaching jobs due to my voice. And then my legs started giving way, especially stepping up and down curbs. And I had generalized overall weakness, and my hips wouldn't stay in place. So as a newlywed, I was facing the return of symptoms. The first doctor I saw in Kansas was the Kansas City MG expert, whose name I'd been given the one time I saw the UMKC Student Health Services at the old Menorah Hospital. And he said, "You couldn't have had myasthenia as a child." The next doctor I saw, because my hip kept getting out of place and I had back pain, gave me muscle relaxers. And I could barely walk from the parking lot into the office building for a new job. But that was my nerves, not the muscle relaxers. But that doctor had a professional medical organization position and was out of the office yet a lot. So a Dr. Gerke saw his patients. Dr. Gerke wondered, why won't your hips stay in place? So I continued to see Dr. Gerke. First, he prescribed zinc tablets, which helped a little bit with the weakness. Next, a medical student was doing a clinical rotation in Dr. Gerke's office and suggested measuring my strength by having me squeeze the bulb for pumping a blood pressure cup, and my grip gradually weakened. So Dr. Gerke prescribed prostigmin. But, oops, before I was regulated on medication, I became pregnant. The first 6 months, I was stronger than I'd been in years. Then I left my job at the end of January, and MG reared its head full speed ahead. And our daughter was born St. Patrick's Day in 1977 at 8 pounds, 11 ounces. And cautiously, the doctors kept her in the NICU for observation for 3 days. So here's this 8-pound baby in the NICU. This is a picture of our family at like at 3 months. She was 3 months old, and you can tell my snarl. It shows up more over here. And we always like this picture because she was grabbing onto her granddad's hand. She was granddad's girl. My first crisis was June 10th, 1977, when Amy was just at 3 months old. I choked eating shredded wheat at breakfast and struggled to breathe. The paramedics wanted to put a bag over my head, thinking I was hyperventilating. My family said, no. Okay, the ER doctor wanted to send me home, and I said, not until I sit up first. And when I sat up, the nurse noticed irregular heartbeats, and I was admitted. And during this time, I did have positive tinselin testing and the electromyographic studies, which confirmed MG. And I think it was slightly after that they started doing the antibody testing, and I am AChR positive for antibodies. Okay, I improved very slowly. My parents drove the 1 hour each way to do our laundry the first wet year of Amy's life because I couldn't walk up and down the steps to the basement to do it. And being unable to carry my 8-pound that soon became 12 pounds baby, I used an umbrella stroller around the house more. Then magically in 1978, a small pink capsule was prescribed, that same one I'd had earlier as a child. It was ephedrine sulfate. And within a few months, I was running a 24-hour insurance policy typing service out of our home. I hired typists, trained them. We picked up the policies at insurance companies one morning, typed them during the day, and returned them to the insurance companies the next morning. So I was working from home back in like 1978. Everybody's complained about it, recently, but I've done it for years. The medications that stabilized me were Mestinon, 60 milligrams every 2.5 hours while awake. I didn't take any overnight. And I took the ephedrine sulfate, 25 milligrams twice a day, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And I did continue to take the zinc tablets and other vitamins. I had 15 years of great control, and we had a full, meaningful life along with family life. I taught speech and drama part-time at St. Mary's High School in Independence. I began working on a reading education graduate courses at UMKC for a special reading certificate. Then I taught language, arts, and religion full-time to 7th and 8th graders at St. Martin de Porres. It used to be on Swope Parkway. The problem was we didn't have medical insurance, and Roy's small business employer excluded him and Amy when they did decide to get medical insurance. Why? Because I had an MG and I was uninsurable. So that's when our St. Joseph life move began. We moved to St. Joseph, worked on 3 houses until we got settled in our present home. I did work for the St. Joseph School District, and I started working toward my master's degree. I taught at Sturdsville, Chapter 1, Reading 1 to 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade Language Arts, Speech, and finished my master's at UMKC. I was a little bit busy that year. Also, that's the second job I ended up losing in the 1990s. But so our solution for no insurance was Roy come up to the Air National Guard full time. So he had medical and life insurance and retirement, and we all had coverage. And she mentioned the St. Joe's support group, and I did start having support groups meetings in St. Joe at that time. And I got this out of Allison's anniversary book, because I didn't have the picture of one lady. That because this is me, Amy. This is my mother, Viola. She lived at Gower. These other two couples also lived at Gower. My mother was a one woman MG awareness committee, self-appointed. She thought everybody should know what MGB was, because at any time it could affect them or someone in their family. So when this gentleman went to the eye doctor, ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist said he could possibly have MG, they knew that I had it. They contacted my mother, and he was in to see my doctor within a week to 10 days and put on medication for his MG. And this couple were like neighbors of these two in Gower. And you'll see this lady in a little bit. There'll be more about her. So that leads us to the 1990s. And that's when I had my MG bottomed out. That 1992, I spent Easter ventilated in the hospital after being transported by ambulance. Thanksgiving 1992, I was in the hospital after my then 15-year-old daughter with learner's permit drove me while her dad was giving me mouth-to-mouth in the back seat. Then in 1993, in September, my now 16-year-old daughter drove me from her grandparents in Gower to St. Joseph, 15 miles away, with me struggling to breathe. And this is my 16-year-old ambulance driver. And I said, you see this lady later? Well, when I was in ICU, 2 nurses were changing my bed due to diarrhea mess from being overdosed on Mestinon. I was flopping my arms around trying to get their attention, and they were impatient with me because I was, and Doris noticed the monitors and rushed in. My tube had been unconnected from the ventilator, and the machines were going crazy. Then another time, my pulmonologist had put me in the hospital just for observation because I had congestion when he saw me. And when Doris came on duty, she noticed I was in the hospital, and she stopped by my room just as I was struggling to breathe. I was starting to have problems breathing. So she called a code blue and instructed the rescue team, to let me continue to listen to my relaxation tapes. And yes, that is the woman back here. So she knew about MG because her husband had MG, and she knew me, so she kept an eye on me in the hospital. So she knows that I consider her my guardian angel. Okay, so some of the problems during this time was I needed the respirator to breathe. in 1993, I ended up being overdosed on steroids until myopathy developed in my legs and I was unable to move my legs. And of course, that also made me overdose on Mestinon, so I couldn't even hold my eyes open to watch the TV in ICU. So I was transferred to Kansas City by ambulance with a nurse using a bag to keep me breathing. They immediately reduced the steroids from 500 milligrams to 180 milligrams, did plasmapheresis 5 times. I still couldn't move my legs. Did IVIG. The first treatment of IVIG, I was able to start moving my legs, but it took all of them to really get going, and physical therapy. And Dr. Schwartzman was my lifesaver there. So I did eventually return home using a walker. I walked at the mall to gain strength because I could sit down as needed along the way. And that's when I found the Myasthenia Gravis community on the old dial-up Prodigy service. And that's when I was blessed with a friend named Stanley Way. He encouraged me to put my story on the old Prodigy online service. He helped me learn coding to put my own web pages on the internet. And he insisted I do a breakout on the possibilities of using the internet with him at a MGFA annual meeting. And everybody was, oh no, we can't do anything like that. And he made sure I was on the MGFA technology committee that chose the myasthenia.org as the URL and determined what it needed to have on it. And then he encouraged me to take steps to organize an internet chapter. And his is one of the personal stories that is in the ebook that we'll talk a little bit about later. So why do I share my story? Okay, I've had life-threatening breathing crisis 5 times requiring intubation. I truly believe I've been saved to share my story and give others hope, especially those that are newly diagnosed with myasthenia. It's a strange condition. It's difficult for patients, their families, their friends, and their employers to understand. And also, I was diagnosed in 1957. I didn't meet another person with MG until 1977. I had one college roommate that had heard of it. That was it. It's a long time to be all alone with some strange condition. But I began sharing my story on the internet. These are small, but they're just examples. They're not free to read. But my story was growing up and living with myasthenia gravis. And I had Amy put her input and her reactions to my story. So her reactions are the part that's in the dark in the parentheses, and then my story's in this. And then that went up in 1996. The next year, 1997, I started the Life with Myasthenia website we're on the old Prodigy network. So they're not up there anymore. But it had the things about living with MG. And I also had a website that shared the MG support groups wherever they happened to be. The Kansas City ones, the Nebraska ones, California ones, wherever they were. And in 1998, we did begin an actual chapter of MGFA that was internet, and it was truly international. This is Dan Way, that was the spearhead of MG on the internet. Stan Way and was, yeah. Okay, this one and this one, whoops, you can't see them, but these two were in Canada. This was the MGFA executive director at the time, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. He was connected with the WHO at one point. This was Irv Beck from Connecticut. He's a character that everyone appreciated. Dale was from Pennsylvania. Carol lived in New York then. She's in one of the Carolinas now. And I was executive director at that time. And our mission was to assist the MGFA in their purpose, provide support to isolated myasthenics around the world. And I think at some of the meetings we had like 20 different countries represented, and we were trying to connect patients with local chapters. So we weren't trying to take the place of local chapters. We were just trying to guide people to them. And we wanted to bring about greater public awareness using the internet. The vision was to connect all myasthenics to information, support each other. So there was a web page, there was a moderated listserv, and weekly chats on various topics. And this is one group that were in a Yahoo MG group, and they had 2 different retreats at Branson, Missouri, where they shared snowflakes, because this lady and the wife of this man crocheted snowflakes and sent them to everybody that turned up having MG. Some of the activities I had during this time were walking at the mall with a program, then that morphed into Volks Walking with a group that still meets on first Tuesdays. We visited nursing home residents in Klein with our dogs. I started doing exercises at the Senior Citizen Center using their new equipment. And we've enjoyed doing events with our MG Car Club. And yes, I have 2 kinds of MGs. This one's Amy's. I have a yellow one, and they're for sale. Okay, some of the challenges of the 2000s. I take the brand name Mestinon. The generic, I might as well take an aspirin. So when my husband retired, retirement insurance didn't pay, so I had paid cash for it until it hit $800 a month. I finally got approval until 29.99, thanks to Dr. Hollenbeck, but the mail order pharmacy still tries to substitute it. Another frustration has been trying to get a new CPAP for over 3 years. I've had 3 sleep studies, but my old one is 7 years old and doesn't work. Currently, I'm doing well. Amy and I both have been with the St. Joseph Adult Education for over 20 years. Here we're presenting one of my English as second language students with a book she earned. This year, I don't have a regular class, but I'm substituting, and I'm helping with the ELL testing, because part of it, the speaking part, has to be done one-on-one, and the teachers themselves can't test their students. We like to eat out. That's one of our Mother's Day pictures, eating out. And I mentioned my pen pal. This is my pen pal, Christine, and she's been writing to me, and we've been writing back and forth since I was in 4th grade. So she was still already my pen pal and had sent me the ponytail clasp, pink plastic one that busted when I fell backwards on the steps. We now communicate using WhatsApp instead of letters that take up to 3 weeks to cross the ocean. And this is one of the times that she's been here. She's made quite a few trips to the United States, and I've been there 3 times. My mother and all of us went the first trip and met her family and all. Then I was lucky enough to go back to her 2 daughters' weddings. I'm also doing Tai Chi classes online and in person. I do lots of virtual activities, including virtual church. And here I'm watching church outside on the deck with the sunshine and the blue skies and the trees. And I like hibiscus, so I have several of those. And the book Allison referred to, we call it Hope for Living a Long, Full Life with Myasthenia Gravis. All the people whose stories are shared have had myasthenia 25 years or more. And we want to give hope, especially to those that are newly diagnosed, that they can survive a long time too. And I said I'd mention more about Stan. Stan Way treated my husband Roy to a tour of Goddard, NASA, on one of Roy's deployments as he was leaving the country on a deployment. But actually, there were 2 NASA employees that have MG that I've met on the internet. The other one is Chuck Klein. He was a biologist with NASA in California. He's the one that chose the spot for the rover to land on Mars. And Stan worked on gloves that the astronauts used, among other things. And Stan's the one that his personal stories in the ebook. I said I'd say more later. This is Monica, who lives in Portugal. She has shared her story. She's had MG since she was quite young. She's actually been an English teacher in Portugal. She's Portuguese, but taught English classes. And she received the Volunteer of the Year award from the MGFA and surprised all in attendance when her voice came over the loudspeakers to accept it. And MGNet was broadcasting the MGFA annual meeting over the internet, and now the attendees were hearing the voice of someone watching in Portugal, and their mouths just fell open. They were spellbound. That's one of the pleasant memories. Bobette lives in St. Louis. She was the director of the MGFA St. Louis chapter for many years. This shows Bobette. I think that this one's Flint. She has Briss now, but Bobette and Flint were here in St. Joseph when we used to have a No More Stairs conference. And I was on the planning committee for that because I found through the years that, I was only all by myself with MG pretty much. And I connected with other disability groups. So No More Stairs with several different disability groups within St. Joseph region came together and had a conference, had speakers, including Chris Burke that Amy got to pick up at the airport, and several other people. And Flint and Art Fudge got acquainted, and they were dear friends. And Bobette faces MS and MG both with humor and advocacy. And like I said, her story's in the ebook. Then Martin is another one that faces MG with a humor. This is his wife, he and his wife, and she's been with him for his 35-year adventure with MG. If you meet him at a meeting, he may give you a free ticket. This is a free ticket. It's not good for anything. It's just free. So keep this stub. It is helpful for filling up space in billfolds, pockets, and drawers. And Eddie he's been kind of reticent about having MG, but he agreed to share his story in our ebook. He used to live in Kansas City, and he served on the board of directors of the Kansas City Myasthenia Gravis Association, and also the board of directors of the National MG Foundation of America. He now lives in Oregon with his wife, Gloria, and 2 pooches, and she's actually a talented pet photographer. I mean, she's a wonderful photographer of other things too. And he does a lot of volunteer activities in Portland. Then Allison has agreed to share her story in our next rendition of the update. I would like to update it next year. And I have Allison and several others willing to share their stories. This was Allison and me and another patient holding the Missouri Proclamation last year when the world was shut down. We met by the Missouri River with masks on. Allison also took the last picture of Roy and me together at the MGA annual meeting in November 2018. At that time, we didn't know it would be the last one, but you can tell he enjoyed attending MG meetings. So the book again, it's Hope for Living a Long, Full Life with Myasthenia Gravis. And to get your free book, you email this email address, and it's in PDF form. So you email this address and I send you the PDF of it. And that's it. Okay. Oops, hit the wrong button.
Donna, that was fantastic. As you can tell, Donna has many years of great historical information of myasthenia gravis and people living with myasthenia. So thank you so much for sharing. It looks like, Donna, we've started to get some questions in the chat box. Can you see the chat box?
Amy's in here to make the adjustments. So we can see the.
Look, there it is.
Okay, she's got it up. Yes, they did. Someone asked if I take the brand name Mestinon and have better results. Any idea what is different? I'm not sure what's different, but it makes a huge difference with me. My theory's I was on the brand name for so long that I don't adjust well. And when I've been in ICU, when Dr. Schwartzman was treating me and I had the liquid Mestinon, he would tweak it just a little bit and I would overdose, and he would, or it was overdosing, and he would go, oh my goodness, I didn't expect that. So I know I'm more sensitive maybe than other people. And at one time I tried the Mestinon extended, and it didn't dissolve well in my system, and I'd have symptoms of being overdosed. I'd take it at bedtime, and then late in the afternoon, the next afternoon, I would have symptoms of being overdosed. So, and at some of the national meetings, we've heard pharmacists admit that the generics can have a little bit different ingredients and formulations that they're not supposed to make any difference, but for me, they do.
Thank you. Are there other questions that you guys have for Donna?
I felt like I was speeding through it, but it's hard to get around 60 years in 60 minutes.
Karen says she loved your presentation, that you inspire her. She likes to see someone who learns from technology. Thank you.
And I didn't say, but I've also taught GED online. So I did that. In fact, I didn't tell the teaching story that Allison wanted me to say. I took ephedrine sulfate for years, and then it got so that they weren't making it for patients anymore, and I had to get it formulated at a pharmacy, and it wasn't in the market because that's what they make meth out of. So I had hard feelings toward, all the meth addicts and all of that, until I started teaching adult ed. And my first assignment was to teach within the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center here in St. Joseph in the GED classroom, and then I had a literacy class. So I got to know the guys that their lives had been destroyed by meth and their families and all. So I kind of softened my attitude on them.
Looks like you got a couple other comments about how inspiring your story was. It says, thank you so much, Donna. Such an inspiring story for so many of us to learn from. Al says, thanks for sharing your inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Are there other questions for Donna?
I'll type the email for the book in the comments. It's going to let me.
That would be great.
On Amy's computer, so where's your @ sign? There it is. Well, it feels different, I'm not used to the computer I was using. It's a newer computer, but it's very slow. And between my internet service and my computer, we had problems.
So it looks like if you want a copy of Donna's book, she's put the email address in the chat. It's hope4 capitalized living@gmail.com. Amy, do you want to add anything as Donna's daughter?
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We hear you.
Okay. I just want to say that, as a family member of a patient, one of the things is it's important that you take time for yourself, even though your patient may need you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have to take time and focus on yourself a little bit, because otherwise you're not able to fully be there for your patient. And if you're not able to be there fully, then they don't get the needs met that they have. And even though you think you're not looking after your patient and everything, you have to take time for them, for yourself, because otherwise you can run out of steam, and that does neither one of you any good.
And I'd like to add one more thing about family members. Amy's grown up knowing I took medicine, and what medicines I took. And when I was running the insurance policy typing service and driving all over Kansas City with boxes of policies. And if I needed to take my Mestinon, she knew where it was. She got it out and gave it to me. She's always known about my condition, my medication. She went to the St. Joseph support groups before we moved to St. Joe. And the lady made angel food cakes that hosted it. And she loved to go there and get Mrs. Wilson's angel food cake. And then later, when she drove me from Gower to St. Joe by herself, she was the one that was speaking for me at the ER and telling them I was having a myasthenic crisis and not to lay me flat on my back, because that I'd go out like that. And so some people don't want to talk about their conditions, but it's important that the family members know, and it takes some of the mystery out of it if they know what's going on with you, instead of your eyes droop or you sound drunk or you're falling down. If they understand the condition, they know what's happening and don't get scared. Roy and Amy could see when I was starting to get weaker before I would, because they could see it in my eyes and my smile. And I just gradually kind of adapt being weaker, don't notice it. So do share your information with your family.
So glad that you added that. I think that's good insight for everybody to have. Are there any other questions for Donna while we have her online? Donna, anything else you want to add?
I'll probably think about it of something after we right now I don't think of anything else.
Well, you guys, this was wonderful. Donna, thank you so much for presenting. Now, we've talked about you presenting and sharing about your book for a long time. And so I'm glad that we finally were able to make this happen. And thanks for taking the time to put a presentation together. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We will see you in 2022 for virtual programming. So
Allison, I just saw another question from someone.
Oh, okay.
It says, was there a time when you were off medications? If so, for how long?
I was off medication from like 1959 to 1976. And I had, the last 4 years of that, I had trouble getting re-diagnosed. But until 1972, I did real well.
Amy, did you see any other questions?
I
don't see.
No, I'm not seeing any more.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys, thanks again for joining us. Donna and Amy, thank you so much. And we hope everybody has happy holiday season, and the MGA is here if you need anything. So have a great rest of your night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.